down and I do strings strad is equal to strings violin. I'm downcasting on the violin that, hey, it's a string, so anything that I've done to violin as an instrument will, become strad, which is now type strings, and then I can plug it.
Okay. Yeah, so let's illustrate that with a little example. And let's get rid of this logger stuff. Okay, so let's look at that specifically. Okay, so compiler allows that. Why? Because strings is a instrument. All right, so okay, is that?
So that means that in parentheses means of the type.
Yeah. Okay, so what this says, again, you keep in mind just what the syntax is. So this declares violin variable to be a type of instrument.
Okay.
This declares string variable to be a type of strings.
Okay.
And the instance that I'm setting it to is this instrument cast to a strings. So it's the same reference.
So, okay, so I got it. Is that
So somewhere, like, see what's going on. So somewhere in here, here's the violin. You know, and it's got a bunch of stuff in it. So the violin instance points to that. In this case, what I'm calling it the string variable also points to that. They both point to the same thing. The difference is that this is this and the strings.
okay? So that strings in parentheses is almost like a stringify or something like that.
No. Don't think string. Maybe I should have used brass instead of strings. But no, what that says, strings is a class. And this says that I'm going to treat this variable, this expression, says, all right, turn this into a strings, but it doesn't turn it into anything because it already is a strings. This is a so yeah, and actually here, rather than here, there's just some value. And way underneath, there are memory locations where all this is taking place. And unlike other languages in Java, we don't have any access to that. Okay, so this stands a fighting chance of succeeding. And so now I can, well, what I need to do is, of course, add string. Okay, so here I've added the pluck, and I'll just do that one. Okay, so now, oops, pluck. Oh. Okay, so when I do that, however, all right, so now cannot find symbol. Why? Because violin is a type of instrument, and instrument does not have the pluck method. Now, okay, so now why let's introduce here's what would happen. Here's what could happen. All right? Absolutely legal. Why? Because brass is an instrument. So the fact that I've called this a violin is a purely arbitrary. It's like supposedly Lincoln once said something like, if you call a tail a leg, how many legs does a dog have? Still 4, because calling a tail a leg doesn't make it a leg. So calling a variable a violin doesn't make it a violin. It's just a variable. All right, so I try to make it a brass. Now with the compiler, I don't get any red squigglies. Why? The compiler still says this stands a fighting chance of succeeding. Not because violin, well, not because I know that violins is a strings. In fact, at this point, I know it isn't. But because it's an instrument, and strings is an instrument, this stands a fighting chance of succeeding. But it's not. It's going to get a class cast exception because now I've stuck a brass in. And the compiler has no way I'm going to do that. No way to know that that's going to happen. And even though everything's happening here in a very small place, in a larger program, variables can be pointing all kinds, set to all kinds of different things. So there's no guarantee. And so now I get a class cast exception. Brass cannot be cast to strings. Why? Because brass is not a strings. Okay, so this can't work. And okay, does this? But these are literally the same objects. So okay, so violin. Calling string variable. Okay. So remember, double equal says, are these the same object? You got to be careful. We'll talk about. If I haven't, have I talked about double equals versus dot equals a little bit? Not yet. Okay, but you have to be careful about doing this. But this is going to be true only if they're exactly the same object, which they are. So it's the same object. We haven't changed anything. All we've changed is the ability to access it. And as you can see, this doesn't work. This doesn't work because even though, see, violin is one of these, and when I have the variable like this, then I can do the pluck. So, but even though it's the same variable, it will not allow this because this says you've only declared it to be an instrument, and you may do something like this. And if I do something like that, then this is not going to succeed.
Just remind me, can we uncomment the brass line here?
Okay.
If we wanted that line to work, on line 19, we would both replace strings with brass, and within the bracket, we also, within the parentheses, we also put brass.
Yeah. Oops. Yeah, that would work.
That won't work because
But now, because brass doesn't have the pluck method, so and I can also, let me show you how. Oops. No. Let's play a G. Okay, so here's, remember I said you could all do this on the fly. I mean, and which one you use depends on, there's kind of a tension between being, not having too much stuff and programmer's intent. So here the intent is fairly clear. I would use this only if this is a one-off thing, where I just want to invoke the method once. If I'm going to invoke a number of methods on strings, then I would prefer to do it this way, because now I have a variable I can reuse. Just make sure this actually works. Okay, so I can either put it in a new variable, or I can kind of do it on the fly. Again, if it's a one-off, then this is fine. If I'm doing more than one, then it's best to declare a variable.